Hello, and thank you for joining the discussion today. As we give people a few minutes to join, we're asking everyone to please tell us a little bit about yourself by completing the poll. We'd like to get a sense of who's joining us today. I also like to note that we're recording the session today.
I'll be right back.
Give folks one more minute. Okay, Megan, can we please see the results of the poll? Wonderful. So we have a great mix of people here today. Welcome, welcome. All right, now we can get started. My name is Manica Ramos, and I'll be hosting the discussion today. This is the second webinar in a series designed to bring research on policy and practice relevant to COVID-19 topics directly to stakeholders. Each webinar in the series will focus on the needs of children and families from a specific underserved community during COVID-19. We hope that these conversations can help bridge the perspective of researchers and stakeholders in the policy and systems building arena, while also uplifting and including the voices of family. By applying a race equity lens, this webinar series will highlight the inequities present in the COVID-19 pandemic and identify actionable solutions to challenges faced by each community. The discussion today will have three phases. First, the panelists will offer a brief overview of what we know and don't know about the experiences, conditions, needs, strengths, and challenges of Black children and families during COVID-19. During the second phase, the panel members will have a discussion to bridge perspectives, make connections, and identify gaps. Finally, for the remaining 15 or 20 minutes together, we will open the discussion for the audience to pose questions, share comments, ideas, and inspirations. In an effort to make today's discussion interactive, solutions-oriented, and to increase the likelihood that people walk away with tangible solutions and ideas, we're encouraging the audience to share lessons learned and ideas with one another through the chat box. At the end of the webinar, we'll share a PDF of all the ideas and responses with everyone registered for the webinar. As a facilitator, I would briefly introduce the panel members and provide a quick overview about the topics we will cover today, then we'll go right into the panel discussion. Dr. Zoelene Hill is a nationally recognized expert on public policy studies. Zoelene is a research scientist with the Community Partnerships and Policy Solutions Division at the New York Academy of Medicine and also works for Child Trends. Diamond Hatchett is a mother of an 11-year-old boy. Ms. Hatchett is based in and from Philadelphia. She works at the Universal Family of Schools, which are charter schools in Philadelphia. Her current position is a classroom assistant, and she's working on a bachelor's degree in organizational leadership at Eastern University. Mayor Petrella Robinson is the mayor of North Brentwood, Maryland. Mayor Robinson is here representing the African American Mayors Association, an organization that represents over 500 African American mayors, providing mayors with leadership and management tools, creating a forum for mayors to share best practices related to municipal management, and advocating for policies that impact the vitality and sustainability of cities. Today, we will center the discussion on the experiences of Black children and families during the COVID-19 pandemic and the ways that policymakers, practitioners, and community organizers and others more broadly can support Black children and families to make room for joy amidst experiences of hardship and trauma. While we will identify and discuss the inequities experienced by Black children and families before and during COVID-19 pandemic, today we will narrow our focus mainly to health and healthcare, to education and labor. And I want to acknowledge that the inequities that we'll be discussing today are not new. Instead, COVID-19 has exacerbated inequalities that already exist. Also, before we begin the conversation, I'd like to acknowledge the diversity of Blackness and the diversity of the Black experience in America. There are Black people across these 50 United States and territories. We live in many communities, have different family structures, levels of education, inhabit different social economic statuses, as well as cultural and ethnic backgrounds. However, racist laws, policies, and practices of the past and of the present have circumscribed the freedoms of Black people in America. Therefore, many Black people have shared exposures and shared experiences. Over the last year across the nation, we have all experienced the physical, emotional, and psychological shock of the COVID-19 pandemic. As a nation, we have been forced to shift our ideas of reality and routine, as well as our sense of security, motivation, focus, and drive over and over again. And we have collectively permanently lost loved ones. We somehow continue to push forward, which I believe is the truest sense of the resilience of the human race. Though no one group has avoided these hardships, unfortunately, some of us have been disproportionately negatively impacted, especially the Black children and families. COVID-19 has exposed and further deteriorated the broken economic, social, and educational healthcare systems that fail to serve Black communities. There is a real risk, which is already unfolding, that these broken systems, staggered and partial support will widen already existing disparities for Black children and families. This webinar is a discussion to guide those concerned about Black children and families, professionals and systems, in a conversation about how to facilitate equitable and high quality support for Black children and families, all while making space for joy. I'll turn it over to Zoelene now.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for that introduction and welcoming everyone to the conversation that we're going to have today. I'm excited to be sharing this screen and this panel with Diamond Hatchett and Mayor Petrella Robinson. As Monica described, I'm a research scientist and my training is in public policy studies, and I'll be providing a public policy perspective, but I'm also here to represent my experience as a parent and as a community member. And I'll spend the majority of my time discussing the social determinants of health, the historical and present day policies and practices that created the environments in which Black Americans are experiencing more severe impacts of COVID-19. So data from the CDC show that compared to white Americans, Black Americans are 3 times more likely to be hospitalized for COVID-19 and twice as likely to die of COVID-19. Now, these statistics about higher rates of hospitalization and deaths are important indicators of the impact of the virus on the Black community, but it does not give us a sense of the lived experience, the fear, the suffering, the grief, the resilience, and the continued ability to find joy. And to begin to understand the experience of COVID-19 in Black communities and to be forward thinking about how we plan to move forward, we have to have an understanding of the systems and institutions and contexts that COVID-19 landed in. And I'd like to provide a very quick historical and present day look at the practices and policies that established and upheld broken systems for Black Americans, specifically in the domains of healthcare, health, employment, and education. For healthcare, when we think about segregation in America, we often think about it in the domains of education and housing. However, we less frequently think about segregation in the American healthcare system. And in her book, Medical Apartheid, Dr. Harriet Washington documents racist and inhumane practices of the medical profession from when enslaved Black people were used in medical experiments until the mid-1900s, when the medical profession continued to abuse and experiment on Black Americans. In her book, Making a Place for Ourselves, Dr. Vanessa Gamble describes that for generations, Black Americans were mostly excluded from medical care in hospitals. And when we were admitted into hospitals, it was in separated wings or wards where we received inferior care. And between 1865 to 1960, there was a movement for the development of Black hospitals and Black healthcare facilities to train Black physicians and treat Black patients. And this was needed because until about the mid-1960s, many medical schools denied admission to Black students. So collectively, there is a memory within Black communities about the exploitation, exclusion, and poor treatment in healthcare systems. And more recent research in healthcare systems shows that between 1970 and 2010, hospitals in Black communities were more likely to close compared to hospitals in white neighborhoods. The effect of hospital closings is that Black communities have less access to healthcare and people end up going longer without care, causing them to get sicker. In addition, there have been countless studies across medical specialties showing that Black Americans have lower rates of healthcare coverage, have less access to regular primary care doctor, and are less likely to receive the appropriate preventative therapy. So there are historical and present day reasons why some Black Americans have a mistrust of the healthcare system, and on top of that, lack access to quality healthcare. The second system for us to consider when thinking about Black Americans' experience with COVID-19 is what I'm calling health systems, but are essentially the ecology of health exposures. And those include things like environmental exposures. So studies show that Black populations are more likely to suffer from things like pollutants or industrial toxins in the air and water, and are more likely to live in communities close to landfills, incinerators, hazardous waste compared to white populations. And the ecology exposure also includes food environments. Black Americans are more likely to live in food deserts, which are places where it is difficult to get affordable, fresh food. A colleague of mine, Dr. Kristen Cooksey-Stowers, is pioneering research about food swamps, which are communities with a high density of establishments selling high-calorie fast food and junk food. And not surprisingly, studies are showing that Black Americans are more likely to live in food swamps. The ecology of exposure also includes physical space, particularly in urban settings. Spatially, communities are often not designed for safe physical activities. With environmental exposures, poor food environments, and lacking space for safe physical activities, we have ecologies that contribute to chronic poor health. And we know that COVID-19 has more severe impacts on individuals with pre-existing health conditions. A third system to consider when thinking about Black Americans' experience with COVID-19 is employment. As described by Dr. Deidre Royster, a significant defining context for Black Americans has been the formal and informal exclusion from employment opportunities and even from educational and training opportunities. As a result of these exclusionary practices, disproportionate percentages of Black Americans are relegated to jobs in industries with low pay and low job security. Ironically, during COVID-19, many of these jobs have been deemed essential. And while many other professions have had the ability to stay home, essential workers have had to show up and risk exposure. And finally, the system to think about when thinking about the Black experience in COVID are schools. We know that public schools, like the communities in which they sit, are often racially and economically segregated. And a reason why segregated schools is such a challenge to our society is because they're funded by local taxes. When you have communities that don't have a strong tax base, you have schools with less funding. And when COVID-19 hit poorly funded public schools and school systems, that meant that teachers and administrators had to do the difficult transitions to online learning. It meant that schools had to marshal their already limited funds to provide distance learning materials and to provide internet to students, or know that students were going to do without. It also meant that parents and families had to struggle to meet the gap. And Diamond is here to provide the teacher perspective, so I'm going to leave the details to her. But what I'm hoping that I've laid out to you are examples of foundational systems to which many Black people are exposed. And these systems are by design and by neglect broken. So as we think about how to move forward in COVID-19 and how we rebuild, we need to be thinking about meeting the urgent needs, keeping people in their homes, keeping people fed, keeping people safe. We also need to be thinking about addressing growing mental health needs. How do we give space for grief? How do we give space for joy? And we also need to be thinking about how do we address and dismantle the entrenched systems of racism that created these conditions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Zoelene. I'll now hand it over to Diamond.
Hi, I'd first like to thank Zoelene for that wonderful, just telling us everything that we needed to know and basically telling us, just giving us such thoughtful information. So some of the points that I will be talking about will be my experience as a parent, my experience as a teacher, and just how I find joy just navigating both of the two. Now, Zoelene touched on the topic a little bit. She talked about how teachers and educators had to basically, you know, navigate from in-person brick and mortar teaching and learning to virtual brick and mortar learning. And I first like to mention that in the beginning of the pandemic, many of us were sitting at home without working. Children weren't learning. So that was an experience that kind of threw us off a little bit. So, you know, I'm going to say that obviously the pandemic has affected us all in a, you know, an astronomical way. It's unimaginable how we have been affected. But I believe that, you know, I believe wholeheartedly that the Black and Brown community has been affected disproportionately compared to, you know, our white counterparts. So I'd like to first thank everybody for giving me this opportunity to sit on this panel. And then I'd like to just talk about, you know, the experience that I have as a parent. And I'm sure many of you may be parents and many of you witness the effects that it has on your children, you know, trying to basically, you know, teach at home, which I honestly consider a privilege because many of us have lost our jobs. I find, or I work with students who parents have to decide whether or not they can work or should they sacrifice their child's education. So I believe that is a you know, an issue that we encounter. And then oftentimes I find that some children have to go to a relative's house who are often, you know, grandparents and people who aren't so computer savvy. So that raises other issues. And then, you know, I have an 11-year-old son and he, you know, he needs more attention than I can give him while working. You know, I have children in my school and children in my class whose parents are working at home from a computer as well. And I just feel as though that, you know, it's important to take all of this that can become so overwhelming and just try to find a way to not be overwhelmed, try to put in something to find some type of joy and just know that this is something that we're all going to get through together because, you know, it was already difficult as a parent and working, and now we have the stress of the pandemic. So I just think it's really important to just try to take it one day at a time. Thank you. I'm going to pass it over to Mayor Petrella Robinson.
I'll just 1 second and jump in for a question for you, Diamond. You mentioned making space for joy. Can you share with us today?
Yes. Well, some of the areas that I find joy in would be social media, of course, reading. I'm a big movie person, and even sometimes just going for a walk. Sometimes I need to unplug because I am in school and I am a teacher, and then I have to help my child on a computer with work. So sometimes I need to just get outside and get a breath of fresh air because I have been home since March 15th. So, you know, I think there are many areas that we can find joy. Sometimes some people might think it's reading, some people might think it's writing, maybe a nap. Carving out nap time is very important because as an adult, we tend to forget the things that we need the most: sleep, water, vitamins. So, you know, just making sure that you're getting that self-care in whatever area that you need in whatever variety that you may need it in that's very important to me.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate you sharing. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Mayor Robinson.
Hello, everyone. I'm so glad to be here. I'm glad to be here with Monica and Diamond and Zoelene because we have this relationship together now because of COVID. And I think all of us have a relationship with COVID somehow or another. But I do want to talk about the joy because, you know, I think in the Webster Dictionary, joy is a feeling of great pleasure and happiness. And that's what we want to get back to. I think that is really important that we realize that we can have joy. I think a lot of us were fearful. I was fearful when this thing hit. Do y'all look at Queen Sugar? Anybody look at Queen Sugar know that they're getting ready to go through COVID? Okay, and we've been through it. We know how scary it can be, and we know know how our families have been impacted. But as they said a long time ago, it takes a village to raise our children, to do what we need to do to get our community's needs met. It takes a village. When I was coming up, that's all we had was a village, okay? And that was grandparents, neighbors, preachers, teachers. So joy is being able to be a family again. We did learn that out of COVID. We did learn that we have to be families. We have to come together. I know I will be repeating some things that Diamond and Zoelene have said, but virtually all K-12 students in the United States are currently missing face-to-face instructions through COVID. Many parents and educators thus share a common worry. When the pandemic subsides, where we're getting to, kids will return to school with lower achievement. And there's a lot of them that could not get virtual learning. It just did not work for them. Their attention span was not there. There are also concerns that there were some that did well, some that did not. So parents are juggling between their responsibilities, if they have a job, for them being a supportive parent of their children in school, and even joblessness. Some of them didn't have jobs. So I think students themselves are faced with isolation, anxiety about the virus, and uncertainty about the future. So what is happening in our communities is a difficult change, but now we need to think outside the box. How do we help these families? How do we help families? Mayors, I'm glad to represent, let me say, ARMA. Mayors have thought about this impact, not being in school, and about the families and the impact it has. One definite problem that I saw in North Brentwood is food. A lot of people depended on our children eating breakfast and lunch at school. So not saying they didn't have food, but everybody, they depended on this food. So even if they had a little bit for dinner, they had enough nutritious food to keep them going. A lot of people are not as fortunate, as some others. So food is a big challenge, especially when we're feeding our children. So we got to get back to that point. Just want to place on everyone's mind that a lot of the families depended on this. And at that point, they need to be fed. COVID-19 not only shut down the schools, but unemployment, different family scenarios were just fearful. Our mayors here in Maryland have food distribution centers each week. There's one going on today. Food distribution centers to help people. There were prepared meals. There were also produce to help families make those ends meet. And food has gone sky high. So you know what I mean? Food is out the yang. So I'm telling you, we really need to look at saving our food and doing what we need to do. And parents, let me say this. Parents didn't always cook neither. So let's get that together, because we have to have nutritious foods. But mayors have done in Maryland food distribution every week to help with nutrition. The Maryland Black Mayors has done numerous coat drives and food card distributions. Parks and Planning has implemented grab and go distributions, which Sardi's and Martin's Crosswinds have provided those prepared foods. And Department of Social Services has changed. It is helping people to get food now, a little because people are unemployed. So there are more needs to be met. We need to think outside the box, because we have parents that are homeschooling their children at home or even on their jobs. My daughter does hers on her job. She's a receptionist at the doctor's office, but her child comes with her. So they're bonding, but our children are also losing because they're not getting social activities. Sometimes they need that social activities with each of different children to get started, to know how to communicate. So they are losing that. So we need to think outside the box. I have a sister-in-law, she's a grandmother, and she's doing three of her grandchildren, doing the virtual schooling. So just to say that this is strange. but I think we're getting a hold of it. But let's also remember, this is not the first time this has happened. We've had pandemics before, and we've gone through them. I think this is the worst one of my time, and probably your time. I know it's your time, but we can get through this. When I was coming up, they had a road they called Rosenwald schools. It was a one-room house where they taught, I'm gonna say 20 kids. We can get through this, and we will get through this. I just want to just encourage everyone just to keep praying and always remember that there is another direction that we can go, and we're going to hopefully help solve some of these problems through our talks and what we're doing here in these webinars. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor Robinson. For this next part of the session, well, I'll be posing some questions and to the panel to start to make some connections. The first question is for you, Zoelene. Do you think it's possible for research and policy to promote joy? And if so, how?
I wholeheartedly believe that research and policy can promote joy, and particularly policy can promote joy. I really appreciated Mayor Robinson's definition of joy in the very beginning of talking what it is experiencing like good feelings. And for policy to help promote joy, you make the space for it. So if a parent or if an individual doesn't have to worry about food security or housing security or health, you know what, now they have time to experience a little joy. But when their mind and their time is preoccupied with struggles that they should not be preoccupied with, that is what's taking up their joy. So, it's a kind of like a back end way to it, but absolutely policy can do things to promote joy by removing the struggles, removing the burdens and barriers that families are experiencing.
Thank you. My next question is sort of related topically, and it's for you, Mayor Robinson. What would city supports and policies look like if they were centered around the strengths of Black children and families?
Well, policies and support from cities and towns is submitting legislation. We have to submit the legislation to our state governments that will enhance support of our families in the time of need such as these, and in a state of emergency, because that's where we're still at. We're still in a state of emergency. There should be a state of emergency plan in effect in every city and town that we live in. We should have a continuity of governments. We should have an emergency plan in these sort of problems. I'm not talking about just a pandemic. I'm talking about a storm. We're talking about Texas. You know what I mean? We're talking about different things, floods. We should all have a state of emergency plan. If we don't have one, we need one, and we need to review it in its entirety and to update it, to make sure that we're have partners that are going to play a significant role in these emergencies. So, and policy making. We also need expansion of food distributions, because some of us live in a food desert, like Zoelene said. Some of us live in a food desert. Expansion of eviction moratoriums. A lot of people got put out, and state government was supposed to be here to help them, but they were not. Unemployment benefits are lagging. I mean, they're backed up. So people are not getting it. And health disparities, as Zoelene said, we have so many health disparities in our communities. Families need to be assured that there are food and places they can stay, and to get better health care for all, being able to get medicines when you need them, being able to go to a doctor when you need it. So these are policies that need to be in place, and it's going to take a village, as I said, and that means everybody, federal, state, and local governments, to ensure that we get these policies in place.
Thank you. What I'm hearing from everybody on the panel today is this idea of a real strength being family. Diamond, I'm interested in your perspective during the COVID-19 pandemic. What lessons or insights have you learned about what it means to be a family, who's included in your family, or just family in general?
What I've actually learned quite a few lessons. Obviously, the first lesson would be that, life can change in the blink of an eye. and that it's very short, but it's so significant. And I believe that it's very important to communicate. So communication amongst, my close relatives, my friends and everything, it's so easy to get wrapped up and overwhelmed with the everyday hustle and bustle. And I feel as though, I'm a lover. So I believe that, I want to tell people that I love them. I want to tell them, like, express that I care about them and everything. And part of that brings me joy, to the, like, it's almost like a gift and a curse for me. So just the whole concept of being there for the people that you love and the people who support you. And just also making that time for yourself, because I found myself not too long ago getting lost in the balance of, helping the people that I love and helping myself. And I kind of, emptied my, it's a term that I learned in school a few years back, my emotional clock or something of that nature. I kind of, I depleted it, all my resources. I had nothing left to give. So I just had to make sure that I first fill myself up and then I can pour into somebody else. So that's like some of the most important lessons that I learned during the pandemic.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. I love to hear that. I'm a lover too. I want to just take a moment to pivot a little bit to get back closer to the COVID topic and talk about what a lot of people have been hearing in the news and in conversations with family and friends and colleagues, vaccine hesitancy. Zoelene, I'm wondering if you can give us a bit of historical perspective to really explain where the vaccine hesitancy is coming from. And then Mayor Robinson, I'm wondering if you can talk with us a little bit about some potential policies or practices that we can use to rebuild trust in Black communities.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Monica. I think the narrative of vaccine hesitancy is what kind of shapes the discussion that I led with. And I opened with a discussion of what healthcare has looked like for Black Americans for hundreds of years. There is not just a vaccine hesitancy, although that is there, but another piece of the puzzle is a totally justified mistrust of healthcare institutions and healthcare professionals. It is historical, it is passed on, and it is present day. It's coming from lived experiences that people have where they realize that they are not receiving the care that they need. In instances where people are brave enough to advocate for themselves, they realize they're not receiving the care that they need. There's very recently, maybe a year or so ago, it made a lot of big headlines when Serena Williams, this like phenomenal star, was in the process of giving birth and was advocating for herself and saying, I don't feel well, and the medical professionals dismissing her. And this is something that she has spoken openly about, that she needed to advocate and push for herself and say, run this test and do this. But she's somebody who's like, she's Serena Williams, and if even she is not receiving the type of medical care and respect and credibility when working with medical professionals, you can only think about how regular people experience the healthcare industries. And so I think that there is something very important for us to think about and address, like, how do we think about vaccine hesitancy? How can we, but I think we need to maybe pivot our understanding a little bit and have it include this historical context, this larger present day context, and think about what can medical and healthcare institutions do to build trust within these communities, and not focus on, why do Black folks not want this, or why do they not trust the vaccine, but really focus what have we done, what can we do to mend this relationship. That said, there are unfortunately, lots of misinformation campaigns that are going around on social media. I've seen a lot of them, and and this is something that I would love for maybe Diamond to even chime in on. I've seen less about information campaigns, right? There's
Yes.
just a thing that says go out and take the vaccine, but there isn't more to it. And so I know this is something that Diamond and I discussed, and Mayor Petrella is going to give us a little bit of a policy piece, but I wanted to just call Diamond into this and just have you share your thoughts on like the information or non-information that we have about vaccines.
Thank you, Zoelene, for that. Honestly, since the vaccine has come to market and become available for, for us teachers and healthcare professionals and everything, I've honestly only seen one, maybe a little video, just last week regarding information on how the vaccine works, what it does to help you fight COVID-19, and then even then it was just like it sort of was like they were just telling us just enough to get us to do it, because my current employer does offer the vaccine for us because of course they want us to go back and teach in a brick and mortar. But I've actually only seen one video regarding information on the vaccine, and tons of like you stated, campaigns with misinformation stating that they're going to do this and they're going to do that, and obviously I don't believe any of that, but there are some people out there who will believe that, and there are, like, we obviously have a very good reason, or at least every reason, to be hesitant of something. But I feel as though, like you said, I feel as though that we should be given more information to kind of, ease our mind a little bit, and then we can collectively make educated decisions of whether or not we feel as though this is right for us.
And Diamond, thank you for sharing that. I'm wondering, what type of information do you want? What have you talked about with your friends, your families, your colleagues?
That's an excellent question. The type of information, because I don't think that they're going to be able to give me, or even not myself, they cannot give everyone the answers that they're looking for. It's impossible. The vaccine hasn't been out that long. It's only but so much information that they have. And then, but I think I honestly would like to know more of how it'll help me, how it'll help fight the COVID-19. I was in a meeting just yesterday, I think, and my principal was telling us that he had his first vaccine and that he was waiting to get his second dose. I believe he said, I don't feel side effects now, but they told me that I won't feel side effects until the second dose. And, you will only feel it for a couple of days. Obviously, everybody's body will react differently. So I took that with a grain of salt. But I want to know what they think possible side effects could be, if any, or I want to know more about what it does to fight COVID-19. I was under the impression that if I get the vaccine, then I can't pass it to my mother who's in her mid-60s. But now, there's so much misinformation out there. It may or may not be true. Maybe I still can pass it. Maybe I can be a carrier and I just won't get sick, but I can infect someone else. So I want to, who's not vaccinated. So I would like to know these things, the information that will help me make my decision, because honestly, I'm not against the vaccine, but I'm getting it because I want to protect my loved ones and the people around me. So these are the things that I need to know to help me make this decision.
And you brought up a really interesting point in that this is something that we're also kind of like learning together. Do you think it would build trust or deteriorate trust for people, for scientists to just say, hey, we don't know right now?
Both. I think it would do both, because we all have free will. Some people want to think this, some people want to think that. And in the video that I watched, I believe that the researcher said that there are people who are conspiracy theorists and they don't need logic to make their appointment. I mean, not their appointment, excuse me. They don't need logic to make their decision and to make their mind up. So giving them reason and logic is not going to help them you know, change their mind. So he said to basically reach out and educate those who want that information. And honestly, that's all you can do. That's all you can do.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And Mayor Robinson, I'm interested to hear, what are your thoughts about some of the existing policies or some policies that could be put into place to help rebuild trust in the Black communities?
Well, it's going to be very, very difficult. We're at a time and now that it's very, very difficult because we're in the midst of it. That's another thing. What I can add to this conversation as far as the Maryland is concerned, Maryland has GoVax, GOVAX.gov that has information. This is their campaign to encourage citizens to get the vaccine when it comes to their areas. And I think understanding, we didn't really understand it. My understanding is that they have been working on this. I know I'm going to say it wrong. mRNA. It's a protein. That's what the vaccine is a protein, and not that it's new. It's just they've been working on it for so long, and then people are kind of fearful because usually when you do trials for medication, it takes a long time to get approval for medications to be going out to the public. You know that, everybody knows that. So that is the scary part. I think people are scared because it wasn't enough time. They figure it wasn't enough time to really go. They may had 40,000 people that went into, the testing mode. That doesn't mean I'm 40,001. I might be different than these other 40,000 people. So I think people have a nervousness about that because they don't think it's been really tested. But if we look further back down the road, this protein has been there for a long time. We've had pandemics before, so these policies have been. We've had them, and we've used them. They just have not been as widespread, the whole world, as we've done with this. And now we're going into another variant. So we're looking at things that we're going to have to step up our health policies, and also to get everyone involved, federal government, state, local governments, departments of health. Everyone needs to be aware. How do we fight this and encourage people to do what they need to do? And I find social networks to be discouraging sometimes, because people believe exactly what they see on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. They believe this. Okay, so I think we didn't have that long time ago when polio, and we didn't have all that. People just went because they know they needed to get the vaccine because we're going to stop this thing. So I'm saying that's another point right there. The social networks are putting us all in another mode. We think differently. I have a council person. He's younger than me. He hasn't made up his mind whether he takes it or not. I've taken my first shot, ready for my second shot. And now today they tell us that Johnson & Johnson may be coming to Maryland within the next couple of weeks, which has the one shot. So I think policies have to be looked at after this. And this is going to be an ongoing fight for all of us, because health disparities are here and these viruses are here. And I don't think we'll get rid of them. But we need to get back to doing better in being clean, because we had strayed away a little bit. I'm saying we weren't washing our hands every time we went. So what I mean? I'm just saying that we have to think about what we're doing, and we were kind of strayed away a little bit. So we have to get back into these policies and cleanliness and demanding things, inspections and things like that. So policies need to be in place.
Thank you. It's really interesting to hear from everybody's perspective, this idea of a reflection of our time and we're in the age of information, and there's a lot of disinformation. Mayor Robinson, are there any policies or practices that you or other mayors are doing to try to combat this misinformation, specifically around COVID-19 and the vaccine?
I think Governor Hogan, who's been a leader in this, I know y'all have heard Governor Hogan, he's the governor of Maryland. He's been a leader of trying to keep us informed. And I think that's what we have to do. We have to, first of all, make sure that we're informed. But we also have to we haven't been as close as we should be because of COVID. I mean, we do meetings like this and things like that, but it really doesn't impact us enough until we get to the point that we can come back together. And the more that we get back together, the more people who do the vaccine, then we can build up herd community. So we can have it there. Diamond, I just wanted to touch on you. I think you said about your grandmother, your mother. My understanding is to prevent death.
Yes.
This is my understanding about COVID. I mean, about the shot is to prevent death and prevent hospitalizations for you to be in ICU. You can fight it like a flu, maybe a little worse fight, but I think that is the thing. And policies in place as far as we even put special hospitals. Everybody had a special hospital that you had to go, or a couple of hospitals. If you had COVID, you couldn't be in. You may have went to a hospital and they say you have COVID. They're going to move you to another hospital, the hospital that has the COVID patient. So we have to look at all of that. And we were shutting down some hospitals. We were shutting down Laurel Regional Hospital, and they needed Laurel Regional Hospital open because of COVID. So those are the disparities we got to think about, shutting down hospital centers and building up new hospital centers, building new schools that can accommodate our children, and schools that can, they have disinfecting procedures in place. You disinfect the whole building and things like that. We're going to think outside the box. So I think policies are going to play a great part in this, but it's going to take some time.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mayor Robinson, Diamond, and Zoelene. This has just been an incredible conversation and a real pleasure for me. I'd like to take a moment now to stop and see, Megan, are there any questions for the panel?
Right now, we mostly just have a few comments about the vaccine, and just kind of I'll just read off a few things. So one participant said that they wanted to know more about the long-term effects of COVID and, possibly the vaccine. Also want to know if it will cause things later on, because that's the thing too, is there's so much unknowns beyond this. Another person said that she heard that there's no vaccine approved for children. So when they have school openings, and it will only provide vaccines for the parents and staff, who knows how that's going to affect our communities. And then another person said there have been format of talking points when doing outreach to communities of color about the importance of getting back the COVID vaccine. So that's good that this information is out there, but then finding the right people, I think, finding the right information and giving it to those who need it, it can be really tricky. Okay, there's a few more things coming in. Please, I encourage you to send any questions or comments in right now too. Another person is curious about how long the immunity will last. Will it be like the flu shot? Do we need to get a new one every year? And another person mentioned that children under vaccine weight can be vaccinated, I think. So I didn't know that. That's all I have right now, but I'll jump back in if you want to. Oh, wait, yeah. I just got another question, so I'll start with this one. Do you have any suggestions for ways schools can support Black parents regarding mental health?
Yes, I'll kick off and
start it.
I think acknowledging it. I think normalizing mental health. I think destigmatizing it. Even before COVID-19 and before we all started to experience the heavy weight of mental health, it was something that for Black community was very taboo and very stigmatized. And I think we need to do everything we can to get rid of it. If that means that we're offering universal mental health services to children and to families, and finding creative ways of doing that, I think that is something that absolutely needs to be done. And as we're thinking about rebuilding for COVID and after COVID, it's that sort of planning. It's like, what do we know are the things that have really been impacted by people that we haven't been able to touch, right? Like, and I talked about how mental health is one of them. I even talked about grief. It's like all these things that are sitting heavy that right now we don't have a place to go. As we're planning for the opening of our society, it needs to be about developing programs and systems embedded in our day-to-day that address that.
Thank you, Zoelene. I'll just add a little bit in general for connecting and working with parents, any parents, and Black parents also. You want to really take a moment to understand where the parent is and let the parent identify the goal. Oftentimes we, and even in the best of intentions, are trying to help families, and we think that we should be the ones deciding what the goal should be. As a support, while you should be there to help scaffold along, let the parent identify what the goals are, and maybe that changes and evolves over time. But approach that relationship as a true partnership.
Is it possible, could I add on a little bit to that? My perspective as a parent and a current educator, I would honestly say, I've kind of had both ends of the stick dealing with mental health during COVID-19, and dealing with scholars and even parents who had grief issues and everything. I think is very important to know that while we do want to get as much of this information, we want to educate our scholars. We know that they've missed so much instruction, and that we're already in communities where, as though our textbooks aren't as well out of date. We have truancy issues and everything. But I also want to stress that it's so important. Excuse me, I'm sorry. It's so important that they need a break from the screen. There's virtual fatigue. There is overwhelming amounts of homework in some grades and some classes, like kindergarten, where they're sitting on the computer for 8 hours at a time. That takes a heavy toll on people who may not have even been used to using a computer or submitting assignments online. So I think that I had recommended something, or just came up with the idea, like maybe we should have more asynchronous days. Maybe we shouldn't have to be on every day. Like when we got the storm and they gave us a snow day, we was like, oh my gosh, like, we have a snow day. Because when it's initially started, we was like, oh well, our snow days are down the drain. And then children who may not be going outside due to COVID have the opportunity to go out and play in the snow and have normalcy for a second. So I think that even considering some things like that, a real brain break is very important.
I'm going to jump in with a few more questions or comments. One participant said she thinks that many in the field are hesitant to talk about vaccines due to not knowing enough, which is totally valid. Another person said, what are Black parents experiencing during COVID-19 distance and hybrid learning around attendance? How can schools collaborate with families who are not ready to send their children back to school yet and are struggling to have students attend online learning? How are states and schools decriminalizing absenteeism and helping families participate in learning in the ways that will work for them and not engage their custody of their children? Will not endanger the custody of their children.
Wow, that's a lot and a great question. If anybody on the panel has a quick word they want to say, we'll do that. And otherwise, we will put together some responses and resources that we'll send to the entire panel or the entire audience. Go ahead, Diamond.
I'd like to say from the educator standpoint, now I know that there is an official way to deal with absenteeism and truancy and everything, but anywhere that I work as an educator, I want my parents to know that we have their back and we have their children and their best interest at heart. So obviously there are some obstacles that parents encounter and that they are encountering right now. So that's why I stress the fact that, open communication is most important, because you can be at home and there can be they can be without electric and we wouldn't even know. And like these things happen, these are normal things that happen in our communities. So we keep a variety of ways to communicate: telephone, email, Class Dojo, which is like a little app that we use for incentives and communication, and your school all calls. And we reach out to our children and our parents several times a week just to check up on them. We have designated mentees, so we may be a mentor, and we just let them know, like, if you're going through something and your child cannot make it to class, just let us know. We got you. Because it's not my intention to burden you any further than you're already being burdened. I want to educate you and I want to help you. So we say, if they gotta miss a couple of days, just let me know. Send me a little email, or I'll check in on you if I don't hear from you. But if we don't hear anything, like we just try to take it case by case and just see, we have to deal with every case differently.
I think that's a great segue to one of the other questions that was just said. How do I advocate for my child who is definitely experiencing virtual fatigue? What do I say to the teacher? And it sounds like you just anything. Just let her know that they're struggling.
What's actually happening. Yeah. Thank you so much. And we will add some thoughts to that questions and all the other questions in the chat box, along with some resources, including a 3-series brief focus on federal, state, and local policies that can address issues related to systemic racism for Black children and families that my colleague and friend, Dr. Krishana Lloyd, it will be releasing with her team next week. And in the 2 minutes remaining, I'd like to do a quick flash question for everybody on the panel. If you have one takeaway for the audience, Mayor Robinson, Diamond, Zoelene, 10 seconds.
Okay, I just had some upsides of the COVID-19 that we need to look at. Time with loved ones is important. Okay, the great outdoors is beneficial. Okay, help us through that mental stability. Technology can be a great tool. We know that it brings people together. Use it wisely. I think that's another point. Scientists and expert researchers and healthcare professionals and our first responders work tirelessly. Okay, let's give them the credit that they're due. Every person has an opportunity to be a blessing to another person. Okay, that helps you because it gives you what you need inside to help you build yourself up. A sense of purpose can make each day more worthwhile. Find something you care about and pursue it. And we need to think about that really, really deeply. Health is never guaranteed. And that's what we need to think about, even for those who are young. Treat your body and mind in the ways that it will benefit you. Serving and helping others not only bless lives, but lifts their spirits. The people around you matter. They do matter. Treat them with kindness and respect. More times at home offers a chance to better build the foundation of a family. Because we didn't spend a lot of, sometimes some of us did not spend a lot of time at home. And one more thing, we are stronger and united in our country and our communities and family. So don't let difference of opinion or experience pull you apart. Seek for ways to unite and build cooperation and understanding with those who differ. So those are the few of the things that we can add to help our joy. So I hope that is something that everyone would sink into their minds and brains and do some things and help us to be better people.
Mayor Robinson said it all.
I
Yeah.
was just about to say that. Thank you so much to everybody in the panel and the audience. We really appreciate your time and your concern and efforts for supporting the Black children and families through this pandemic and more generally. We will be following up with some resources and some more notes for everybody. Thank you so much. And I just want to say to everybody that we have to remember that we're all getting through this together. Even if you're having a hard time now, keep pushing. We got to keep on keeping on. All right. Have a great day.
Okay, bye-bye. Take care. Be safe.
Yes.